Welcome to High Stakes. I'm your host, Tracey Devlyn. On this show, I chat with authors about the moments in their stories that change everything, what's at stake, what it costs, and why we can't look away. From thrillers to romance to sci-fi and beyond. Let's get to it. Joining me today is Bram Stoker Award-winning author Cynthia Pelayo to talk about her new genre-bending horror novel, It Came from Neverland. Welcome to the show, Cynthia.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing great. I'm so happy to have you here. I
Thank you.
uh I I was thinking about horror just in general, and I'm old enough to have gobbled up those slasher movies in my teens, like Friday the 13th and Freddy Krueger and all of those folks. But horror seems like it's a genre in both film and publishing. It seems to reinvent itself every few decades, and I feel like horror even has these subgenres in it now. And maybe it always did, and I was just unaware, but I feel like it has these subgenres to it now. And I was kind of curious, what does it mean to be a horror writer these days?
I think, so many of us who write horror, I think many of us look at it as the genre of truth. There are many things that, many topics that we tackle that are uncomfortable.
Mhm.
And so to be a horror author is being able to, enter whatever, specific topic that you're exploring and recognize there is probably an uncomfortable truth here to uncover.
Okay. Yeah. Now, when you are amongst your horror friends who also write in the genre, do you guys delineate what you're writing in different ways? Like I was mentioning with the subgenres, do you do that, or is that not a thing?
Yes, it's certainly. I think of Grady Hendrix had said something to the effect once of he thinks of horror as a category, and within it, you have a number of subgenres. There's everything from you have middle grade horror and
Yeah.
very quiet, atmospheric, and then you start getting into the gothics to the far end of the spectrum. That's probably more the extreme or splatterpunk area.
Yeah.
I consider myself to be a little bit more at the quieter end of the spectrum. Much of what I write is quiet or psychological horror. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Would you consider R.L. Stein a horror
Yeah.
novelist?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Yeah, yeah, for middle grade.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Wonderful. Okay. What for from a reader perspective, I guess, what itch do you believe horror scratches for readers who just adore this genre?
I think a lot of people, especially in recent years, have been coming to the genre because of just anxieties, a number of anxieties. It could be anything from people that are managing, a change in lifestyle or,
Hmm.
um, you know, changing a job. I feel like so many people like horror because it's a way to kind of process any type of anxiety that they may be experiencing and do it in a safe place. And so
Yeah.
that's certainly something that we've been seeing. And I think that's also why the horror genre shifts every few years because the anxieties societally may shift. Maybe in
Mm.
the 80s, maybe there was something, the early 80s, there was definitely something that was happening that
Yeah.
contributed to Michael Myers and Jason
Yeah.
Freddy all being unleashed at the same time. Uh,
Yeah.
Now
Yeah.
you're seeing a lot of like interesting Gen Z horror. I'm really fascinated what they're scared about, what they're
Mhm.
scared of. And so we're starting to see a lot of horror films made by Gen Z.
Well, it makes sense what you were saying about the way people are processing their feelings, grief and just all of these anxiety-ridden things because of what's been going on since the pandemic and maybe even a little bit before that. And I know there was a time there where it felt like horror was making its kind of a resurgence. And they were tossing around the term like elevated horror. Have you heard that term?
Yes. So elevated, literary, there's like a number of different terms.
Okay.
maybe speaks to horror that might be, exploring, something that, maybe, for example, Terrifier. The film Terrifier is probably not considered elevated to some, but maybe if we think of like the film The Others with like Nicole Kidman, that probably
Okay.
fits more in that area.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Very
Yeah.
interesting. All right. Well, before we dive into It Came from Neverland, could you tell us maybe just a little bit about yourself?
I am a Bram Stoker Award-winning author and poet. I've been writing and publishing since like the late 90s. I was originally a journalist. And then by night, I worked as a journalist. By day, I worked in corporate consulting. I did that for many years. Now I'm a full-time author, and my books uh, tend to explore like cycles of violence, and I like to use a fairy tale lens since I love fairy tales and children's stories, and I love genre blending. So I love picking up various elements of different genres and like turning the dials on them.
Yeah. I have a confession to make with regards to fairy tales. As a kid, it's funny because I love horror movies. But as a kid, when I would read those fairy tales, they would freak me out. And I thought it was just me because everybody loves a fairy tale, right? So I'm learning now that, yeah, they were a little insidious.
Are scary. Many of them are so scary. The
Yeah,
Grimm's brothers tales are very scary. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure. Well, as you mentioned, you're known for, blending genres and reimagining fairy tales. It Came from Neverland is, of course, based on Peter Pan, but you told this story from a very interesting perspective, which I loved, from Wendy's perspective. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about that, maybe why you decided to do that. Anything you want to share. And please tell us about the book if you don't mind. I don't want to give any spoilers, so I like the authors to do it.
I I mean, I love Peter Pan. I grew up with like the Disney versions of Peter Pan, and I love the Robin Williams film Hook.
Did too, yes.
Love
Yeah. Yeah.
And I've always been fascinated with Wendy and her character and how giving she is and how she loves stories. And what I loved Hook was we saw Robin Williams portraying what Peter Pan would look like as an adult. And I kept thinking about Wendy. Like we saw Wendy portrayed, but like much older in that.
Yeah.
And I wanted to see what she felt like and looked like in her 20s. And as I started mapping it, the timeline based on when J.M. Barrie wrote it, I was like, oh, this would have happened. She would have been in her early 20s during World War One, which is
Okay.
a very unstable point in history. And I just started thinking about it through her lens. Like maybe Neverland wasn't so fantastic because, he promised her, you're going to run off with us and you're going to live forever. And essentially, she gets there and she's just like caring for boys as they're returning injured from these adventures, which is very traumatic for a 12-year-old.
Yes.
And if she was in her 20s during World War One, many women, young women, that's what they were doing by night. They were volunteering with the war effort as nurses and caregivers. And so that's sort of where the story started emerging is I started seeing Wendy Darling in her early 20s, perhaps working as a teacher, and volunteering by night with the war effort. And when one of her students goes missing, she connects it to Peter Pan, who is an evil entity, not a joyful boy,
Very evil.
very evil. He has to reunite with her brothers to finally stop him.
Yeah. No, it's great. And I loved that teacher aspect that you did with Wendy in this story. And I thought it was very just seeing that side of her where she's a good person. She's just a completely good person. She loves kids. She loves reading stories. And then to give her, I guess, even take that love of storytelling and take it into the hospital ward to help this patient out that she was, I just thought that was a very nice dynamic that you put together there. And then at the end, I know we can't talk about the end, but you brought it all together at the end. And, I'm a romance novelist. That's where my roots are. And so that was just very heartwarming for me, the way you kind of wrapped it all up towards the end there.
Yeah, I had to give her a balm after a very traumatic
Yeah.
childhood and young adulthood. And so yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, you betcha. You betcha. So, in general, movies tend to they tend to get away with a lot more than we can in novels, and especially when it comes to animals and children and violence and things like that. Before you started this book, did you have to establish, I guess, like some guardrails for yourself, or are there no guardrails in horror novels? Is that the fun of it, I guess?
It really does depend, especially with horror. It does depend on like the publisher because every publisher has a very different aesthetic. Uh, and admittedly, I did kind of go off the rails at some points, and my editor pointed out a few places like I think we need to pull this back, uh,
No.
just because I think I was just so much in the mindset of like researching World War One and just how awful it
Yeah.
was, that the trench warfare, how many young men, a number of young men would lie about their ages, the ones who like lived in very rural communities,
Yeah.
and they would sign up at like 16, 17. And so my brain was just there in these atrocities, and like that was coming out in places, and we had to kind of pull back uh, in places. The psychological horror element is pretty intense because I think that's even present in Jan Barry's story, like the manipulation of it all. And I wanted
Mhm.
to show, I didn't want to show Peter as it's like looking monstrous because I think what's most terrifying, the scariest monster of all, is our people. And I wanted to show how he could be so monstrous with even his words.
Yeah. Now, I'm going to assume that you went back and reread the classic before you started this story. Did you find that sometimes when you go back and you read those classics, they're a little hard to get through. They're a little dense, from what we're reading these days. Did you come across that with Peter Pan or no? Does it still hold up?
I reread it. I reread the play, and a few other texts by J.M. Barrie. And there was a line that stood out to me, and I was like circling it and like screenshotting it or texting it to friends because there's a part in the novel Peter and Wendy where it says something to the effect of when Peter tires of the lost boys, he thins them out.
Oh, yeah.
And
Ta-da!
I was like, this has been in this text this entire time. How did no one notice this? Implying that,
Yeah.
if there were certain playmates that Peter tired of, he would be rid of them. And so I think that's then the nugget that I grabbed onto and continued on with to show that Peter's so detached from humanity that he doesn't look at young children as like, he doesn't empathize with them. They're just toys. They're just playthings. And when
Yeah.
you can't see a person as a human being, that's when the horrific things can happen.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, on this show, we like to talk about a story stakes. I always joke, love, death, the fate of the realm are all high stakes, and we love those. But what I'd like to hear your thoughts on are what's personally at stake for Wendy in this book?
I think she's trapped in this point of trauma of her past. And I think to some degree she blames herself for it. And so it's much more of a internal character change that I wanted to explore. I really wanted to show her realizing that this wasn't your fault. And if you do not get over this. You're going to be trapped in this period of time in your mind. And that happens to, it's an unfortunate and terrifying and awful aspect of people who have experienced trauma, PTSD. It's the rumination, it's the self blame. And I wanted to show that it might not be a clean healing, because healing from these types of things, it's not a straight line, but I wanted to show the process of it. Like, you need to heal. You need to start healing, and you have the power. You're the hero here. You have the power to heal.
So that would be the stakes for her, is that if she doesn't kind of work through this, then she's never going to heal and she's always going to be kind of stuck in pan world, I guess,
Yes,
wanting to go back, feeling
and
badly for the boys and things like that that she couldn't help. And
yeah,
yeah.
exactly. He could take her back, and we don't want to go back to
No,
Neverland.
no, no.
Yeah.
Uh, well, I noticed on your website that you've published a fair amount of short stories in addition to your novels. I was curious if you could, for those folks who might be interested in writing short stories, what are some of the advantages of doing so? And I guess how do you find publications that you can submit to if you do go that direction?
Yeah, I love short stories. I feel like they're, especially when you're done with you're, you've either completed a draft or you're on submission. It's a nice way to stay creative without jumping into like another large project. And it's also a nice way to like experiment with different points of views and form. I think of a short story as a snapshot of an idea, an image. You don't have a lot of space to explore like a huge arc, um, and so I definitely recommend practicing that skill. Even flash fiction, like really short stories, like under 1,000 words. In terms of looking for places where to submit your work, admittedly, there's a lot of like magazines that are no longer with us, and that's a very sad aspect of it. But I do a lot of searches online in terms of like what are open submissions. A lot of anthologies have open submission. There's like a lot
Hmm,
more anthologies I feel like today than, and maybe it's compensating for the lack of magazines. So looking for
interesting.
open submission periods for short stories. And I know a lot of authors, even published authors, who will write short stories and just share them on their website as well,
Mm.
just sort of uh, you know um, have
Like
that,
a gift. Yeah, like a gift
yeah,
almost.
gift. And so that's really nice too. You want, if you're trying to, yeah, it's a nice introduction to you as a writer. Like, here's a sample short story of mine on my website, and that's a nice way for someone to get to know you and your voice.
Yeah, nice. Okay. Well, switching gears just a little bit, I've got a few questions to help us get to know you, the author behind the book. Uh, do you have a favorite place that you like to write?
I love to write in my office. So I have I live in Chicago, and we're lucky because we live in a neighborhood in Chicago. And so um, I had my back porch room that's connected to my bedroom built out as my office. And
Oh,
so
nice.
right outside of my bedroom is this small room, but it looks overlooks our backyard, and I can look out at some trees and
Oh, nice.
bird feeders, and I just love sitting here. And I have my desk, and on either side is a nice window. So this is where I love being. Yeah.
Oh, good, good, good. And you've got your writing buddy there with you, I think, yes.
Yeah, our puppy, he's here. He's falling asleep now.
Oh, all right, great. What's one thing that readers might be surprised to learn about you?
I'm a poet. I love poetry. I, I love classic poetry. I love classic literature. So it might be surprising also to say I'm working on a doctor. You see the puppy
There
now.
he is. There he is.
Yeah, I started a doctorate in business psychology when I was working in corporate consulting, but I left that because I no longer work in corporate consulting. So now I'm working on a doctorate in English literature. And I just love classic literature. I just think it's fantastic. And I can get lost in it.
Oh, great. Yeah, that's wonderful. It's wonderful. Well, I guess going back to you mentioning that you're a poet, is there a poet that has inspired you more than others, or not?
Um, I think, I mean, right now I'm reading a lot of like Lorca, who's a Spanish poet, and I just love if it's the more lyrical and musical the poetry, I think the more I am just
Yeah.
enthralled. So, um, but Lorca's one that I've just been obsessed with. Of course, like I've read like Shakespeare and Poe was my introduction, I think, to really musical poetry. So I do recommend if you're scared of poetry, because many of us were traumatized by poetry in high school because it was very mathematical, I think, the way it
Yeah.
was taught to us. But if you can find a poet, I even like poets.org, they have like a poem every day. If you could find a poet that you could connect with, and I like reading poetry before I start my writing session.
Oh, I'll be darned. There's another thing that we didn't know about you. That's great. I love that. Um, so my last question here is, what is your favorite thing to do when you finish a book? How do you celebrate or treat yourself or reward yourself? Or do you? Some people don't.
I have two small boys. Well, one's a teenager now, so we go for ice cream.
Okay.
That's our treat because they know when mom's done with a book, I just start like shouting, "It's done!" And then I run downstairs, depending on the time, and I grab them and my husband, and we go get ice cream. So
Oh, great.
that's
What's
our
your favorite flavor?
oh gosh, I've really been liking just I've just been liking like a nice old fashioned like sundae lately. So just
Yeah.
with like the hot fudge. That's what I've been loving right now.
Yeah, it's funny because couple of times my husband and I have gone out and to get ice cream. I get Coke floats. There's something that triggers, or a root beer float. One of those where they're in the small town that I used to live in. There was this little corner diner. I mean, it was very, it's like you see in the movies, right? And you could literally go in there and get a Coke float or a root beer float for like 10 cents. And so it's like a nostalgia thing for me. And I've been doing that the last couple of times. And I just
Oh
love
yeah,
it.
I love root beer float. Those are fantastic. They're so
They are so good. They're addicting. All right. Well, before we go, can you share what's coming up next?
coming up next. I have an anthology out with Simon and Schuster. I do have the arc here, called "Something Followed Us Home" that I edited.
Oh,
So it's
nice.
collection of horror stories by some of like the leading Latin American authors right now.
Amazing. What an honor.
Yeah, so that was wonderful. And I am currently on deadline for a novella that is my version of a reimagining of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein told from like a mother's perspective.
Oh my gosh. All right. Well, I can't wait to see that. That'd be great.
Thank you.
All right, folks, be sure to order your copy of It Came from Neverland today. You can learn more about Cynthia through her website at cynthiapelayo.com, where you'll find all of her social media links, and be sure to sign up for her newsletter while you're there. Cynthia, thanks so much for chatting with me today. I really enjoyed getting to know you and seeing little Benny there too.
Thank you so much, Tracy.
That's it for today's high stakes story. Follow the show so the next episode lands right in your feed. And if you enjoyed today's chat, a quick rating or review helps new listeners find us. Visit tracydevlyn.com/podcast for show notes and links to today's amazing guest and their fabulous book. High Stakes is a proud member of the Authors on the Air Global Radio Network. Thanks for listening. Until next time, enjoy the adventure, everyone.